All right, I think we're looking pretty good. So welcome everyone. As always, thank you all for your time. We really appreciate it. I'll start off by welcoming our guests. We're very happy to have Mary Tiger here from AWASA and John Richardson from the town of Chapel Hill, who will be a part of our later agenda and talking about ways that we're interacting and thinking about ways we can interact even more. I'm grateful to have them both here and people with whom we've worked closely already, which is exciting. Also welcome Tracy Triggs Matthews, who's here representing Jeff Middlestat. And Tracy is a longtime partner at Clean Tech Summit and does amazing work in sustainability. So welcome, Tracy. So we have a little bit of business to start with. I feel certain everyone has read the minutes from the previous meeting. And I would accept now any offers of changes that you'd like to have made, but represent that the door will still be open for changes. But unless there are any protests or any, if anyone saw anything they want to make sure is changed ahead of time, I would be happy to entertain a somewhat informal motion to approve.
That we approve, Jonas.
You make maybe one just small tweak.
Absolutely.
It wasn't water that fits the purpose, it's water that's fit for purpose.
Oh, thank you.
In terms
No,
of
that was yes. No, thank you. That I think that input is represented well in other places, but it's really, I agree. That was great input and we'll make sure the minutes reflect it. Thank you, Aaron.
No worries, perfect. I second.
All right, awesome. A double dip, input in a second. Sorry, Jonas, Aaron's winning, even though you first did. All right, so we have a great agenda today. I've already mentioned it. Thank you for the input on the minutes. And I will just give a brief set of introductory remarks. It's been a fairly short period of time since we met, and we're fortunate that we continue to do things quickly and do really important things. So that's exciting. Everyone knows that tomorrow's Earth Day. We've already been sharing some material and trying to find new ways to celebrate all the university's accomplishments around sustainability. Abigail's going to talk a little more formally later on about her efforts in communications, but it's been a great stream of information already, and tomorrow will be exciting as well. We're going to try a new thing and have a postcard from the field that may or may not go well, but I encourage everyone to have a look and see what you think. I think it'll be fun, at least, even if it isn't terrifically effective. And if anybody's going to look goofy, it'll be me. So that's good. So also the Sustainable Carolina group will be in Carborough tomorrow afternoon and evening at their Earth Day event. So definitely please, if you're there, stop by the table and say hi to everyone. And that will be another great way to interface with the community. So we do have one personnel thing I want to talk about. Vic Agabekoff, who was a 4-year employee of the university and a founding member of Sustainable Carolina and really a foundational contributor to putting together the nuts and bolts of our organization, had an amazing new opportunity and has moved on to a solar company that has moved to North Carolina from California. So we are all very sad for Vic's departure, but more than that, we're thrilled for his new position. So we'll be rethinking that position and very quickly, hopefully turning around and beginning a search to find another member of our team. So we formally thank Vic. He's absolutely fantastic and has lots of ways that his legacy lives on. We put some sensors out and I went to look for some directions about where they might be and got to have Vic's absolutely exquisite directions of how to enter the water, where the cypress knee is that is adjacent to the rock where the sensor is. So his hands will be on our work for a very long time. He was a wonderful team member and we're extremely excited for his future and his opportunity. I just wanted to quickly say that the Champion Sustainability Fund is up and running, that Melanie was soliciting input at the Clean Tech Summit, and we have an open web forum for people to offer suggestions should they want to. We're going to continue to be proactive in trying to look for places where people may have interest and may not necessarily have heard of the fund yet, but it's exciting to have it ready to go. And congratulations, Melanie, and thank you to all of you on the council who have provided invaluable feedback. So fingers crossed, we'll get going on that soon and we'll hopefully be growing quickly, but we will see. I also wanted to talk about some things that are ongoing in the background that'll be coming up at future council meetings. We are doing work around ESG and universities, how they approach the ESG issues broadly. in particular thinking about university investments. So Elizabeth Havas and I have been working with a recent or a soon-to-be graduate from the PhD program in geography, Trey Murphy, on an analysis of our peers, dividing it up into realistic peers, aspirational peers. In the fall, we're going to come to you all with some ideas and some thoughts around how to move forward. But sooner than that, we'll be reaching out, and I actually encourage you, if you'd like to self-nominate, we'll be reaching out to a subset of people to be a part of that subcommittee that'll look through the data and come up with some ideas for what are some possibilities for our university. How do we sit relative to our peers? Are there paths forward that we think are tenable in terms of trying to do better things in this realm? So again, please reach out to me if you're interested in being involved over the summer as we begin to think about it. But at very least, you'll all be hearing about it at our meeting in the fall. And I can just say that the data gathering process has been very, very interesting. So I do think there's some opportunities. So finally, just want to celebrate our undergraduate representatives. I know that MC is not graduating, so we're not saying farewell. I don't know exactly when Nate is graduating, but I think it's soon. So we may be saying farewell, but no matter what, just thank you to both of them. They've been involved from the jump. I met with them, I think about a day after I was named as Chief Sustainability Officer, and they have been really important in shaping the ways that we try to interface with students, particularly with undergraduates. And I don't think we've got it perfect yet. I think we have some really good ideas. Certainly they have been tested in a crucible, having the pandemic going on. However, I think we all know there's better work to be done. And I really appreciate their continued engagement and hope that we'll continue to do so. But just wanted to take a chance to thank them should somebody have to move on and graduate and begin their life's great work in the big world. So with that, I will stop. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Mike, I just had a quick question. I'm just wondering if is there like a Carolina sustainability listserv? I know maybe the last thing we all need is another listserv coming to our inbox, but you've just mentioned like 2 or 3 super interesting events. And I'm wondering if there's any movement there to communicate the work that is going on and ways to connect.
So there is a sustainability listserv. There's also, IE has a big list. And of course, you're aware of the climate scientist list. We're a little loath to create a new list, but we definitely, to the extent we can, use all of our existing resources. But I think that's a good point, that not that you ever will be comprehensive in your communications, especially through something like a listserv at this point. But I think it's a really good point to think back about our way of availing ourselves of the resources that we have, which are pretty great. I mean, there's a lot of, through past efforts, through current efforts, there's a lot of ability to connect. Thank you for that. Anyone else? All right. Well, let's get into the meat of the agenda. We're super happy to have Mary Tiger with us here today. AWASA is going through a strategic planning process. Melanie and I participated as, I don't remember what we were called, maybe stakeholders in an early part of the process. And it was really interesting, and really, for me, it was a great learning exercise, and to realize the niche into which ideas around sustainability fits. Because it is definitely a consideration across the board, but there is definitely a subset of activities directly related to sustainability. We've been really happy through time, this predates my involvement in sustainability, to have had AWASA as a partner, and Mary in particular. So we've invited Mary here today to talk about what we're doing and maybe have an eye towards what else might we be able to do, as this is an area that we've identified as a focus for sustainability. So Mary, thank you for being here.
Thank you all for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to try to share my screen. Thumbs up. Let's see. Are you seeing slides? All right. Good deal. Well, it's really nice to be here. I wish we could, be in person, but this is good. So it's nice to see some friendly faces in the little squares. But for those of you who I haven't met, my name's Mary Tiger. I'm AWASA's Strategic Initiatives Manager. which sounds like a bit of a catch-all, but what I specifically oversee here at the utility for kind of first and foremost is sustainability, and that includes our energy management work, as well as our affordability program. I also oversee our communications and community relations office. And as Mike alluded to earlier, overseeing the development of our new strategic plan and carrying that out after it is developed. So I'm bringing you all a bit of a grab bag of information about some things that are underway in this space, and hope that serves as a good, at the very least, just some relevant information for you, but also, as in the spirit of collaboration and partnership, something to grab into of some opportunities to partner. So I'll start with just a high-level overview of the organization. So AWASA actually stands for Orange Water and Sewer Authority, and it sounds like we might provide water and sewer services to all of Orange County, but we don't. We serve Carrboro and Chapel Hill primarily, which includes UNC. We are a special unit of government, and kind of colloquially we'll say that we're a not-for-profit public service agency, and I'm sure that makes Aaron a little bit uncomfortable. It's saying that we're a not-for-profit. It just kind of helps relay that all of the rates and fees that we collect are reinvested back into the infrastructure and to the operations of the utility. We do provide water, sewer, and reclaimed water services, much thanks to UNC, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. We have a little over 22,000 customer accounts, and we serve a population of a little bit over 86,000. And as I mentioned, UNC is our biggest customer and one of our most important partners. Just a few ways that we have partnered together over the year. So AWASA is about 45 years old as an entity, and prior to AWASA being developed, actually most of the water infrastructure in our area was owned and operated by the university. So you're kind of our parent or grandparent or something like that. And in fact, University Lake, which is one of our reservoirs and is still owned by UNC, and it's leased by AWASA. Probably one of the biggest partnership projects that we've had to date is the reclaimed water system. So that entire system, which takes treated wastewater from our wastewater treatment plant and pipes it back up to the university, primarily for use in the chillers as evaporative cooling water, but also for some field irrigation, some toilet flushing, and a few other purposes. But the entire cost of that system was paid for by UNC, except for about $1.6 million that was covered by grants from the North Carolina Clean Water Management Trust Fund, and a little over $600,000 that was received from the EPA. The system became operational in April 2009. My understanding from the inception of that whole project was the drought of 2001, 2002, which inspired the university to look into this and to partner with AWASA on developing the reclaimed water system. And now the reclaimed water sales average about 750,000 gallons per day, or about 14% of the community's water needs. So it's a great financial investment for the university, and that the reclaimed water is significantly less expensive than potable water, but it was also an investment in the drought resiliency of the entire community. And then we'll discuss a little bit later, in regards to our long-range water supply plans, the university's use of reclaimed water has had a significant impact on the longevity of our existing water supply. So can't talk enough about that partnership and the value of that partnership to not just the utility, but the whole community. We also partner on construction on a regular basis, both on our side and the university side of the meter. So that's a daily partnership that's happening. Emergency management, we have a partnership, and then also student and research engagement. Actually, that's how I came to really know and appreciate AWASA, was as an applied researcher with UNC's Environmental Finance Center. So we did some research for AWASA that was funded by the North Carolina Urban Water Consortium, which is a research entity that AWASA funds with 11 other utilities in the state that funds water-related research by all of the state universities. We've also participated in COVID wastewater surveillance. We're working with a senior environmental studies capstone course right now on the disposal of fats, oil, and greases. So they're doing some social science research with us, which has been great. We've worked with the collaboratory on PFAS research. We host internships. We love putting forward AWASA as kind of a living laboratory and really welcome those types of partnerships. And there's quite a bit of study to study. We have 3 primary reservoirs: Cane Creek Reservoir, University Lake, and the Quarry Reservoir. 2 that we regularly use are Cane Creek and University Lake. And we have protected watersheds for both of those lakes. We have our Jones Ferry water treatment plant next door, which is rated to treat and deliver about 20 million gallons of water a day. We currently are treating about 6 to 7 million gallons of water per day, so it's quite a bit of a capacity there. We have 385 miles of distribution pipe and 6 storage tanks that have 8 million gallons of capacity. On the wastewater side, we have about 350 miles of underground pipe that's delivered to our Mason Farm wastewater treatment plant, which is over by the university's golf course. And it collects wastewater with the assistance of gravity in about 21 pump stations throughout the system. Mason Farm wastewater treatment plant is rated at 14.5 million gallons per day on average. And we recover quite a bit of beneficial resources at the wastewater treatment plant, nutrient-rich biosolids that are used as a local soil amendment. We generate biogas through the anaerobic digestion of the solids, and we burn about half of that in a boiler that is used to reheat the digesters. We'd love to make 100% use of that biogas. We discharge clean water into Morgan Creek, which of course flows into Jordan Lake. And as I mentioned before, that's where our reclaimed water is produced and sent up the hill to UNC. So sustainability is really at the core of our mission and our business. So we're all about protecting public health through the delivery of clean and safe drinking water and protecting the environment. But for this group, I'm just bringing forward a few kind of current topics for us to chew on. One is our long-range water supply plan, which we're in the midst of updating. Another is our energy management and solar leasing projects, which we actually broke ground on our biggest one yesterday of our solar projects. And then, as Mike mentioned, I'll give you some insight into where we are with our strategic plan, which is being developed right now. So this map I showed you before, but I'm going to talk about it in a little bit different way. So we are updating our long-range water supply plan. So our current water supplies now are, again, Cane Creek Reservoir, University Lake, Quarry Reservoir, and then the quarry, which is out on Highway 54, is still actively being mined. And our water yield projections include an expansion of that quarry. So in about 2030, they're going to stop mining, and that the quarry will be expanded. We have an allocation from the state to Jordan Lake. We have had that allocation. It's currently a 5 million gallon per day allocation from Jordan Lake. We've had that allocation since 1988. We have no hard way to get that. We have MOUs with the city of Durham and the town of Cary to wheel that water from the Cary Apex intake, which is here on the east side of Jordan Lake. So that would need to be brought in by Cary, treated by Cary, and then wheeled through Durham into Chapel Hill and Carborough. So those are non-binding MOUs that we have. And we've certainly utilized those in times of emergency, but we have no guaranteed access to that Jordan Lake allocation, but it has been part of the portfolio since 1988. One thing I want to point out on this slide is the size of the watersheds for University Lake and Cane Creek Reservoir. They are both about the same size, about 30 square miles of watershed. So not a huge recharge area. This is especially relevant when you look at the storage size as well. So this is kind of a 100-year look at our water supplies. University Lake has been part of our portfolio since 1932, or the community's portfolio, so before AWASA even existed. It has fairly minimal storage capacity of 450 million gallons. Cane Creek Reservoir has a much larger storage at 3 billion gallons of water, but of course the watershed is still the same size as the recharge area for University Lake. And in addition, the Quarry Reservoir, I should point back on this, a quarry has no watershed. So there's it catches, any kind of rain that might fall into it, but not a lot of water. And so we can fill the quarry from Cane Creek, the Cane Creek Reservoir, but it doesn't have its own watershed. And so, it acts as a really great holding tank. And you can see that, right now it can hold about 200 million gallons of water, and the plan is to expand that to 1.5 billion gallons in 2030. And then there's that kind of Jordan Lake allocation. So at the key question of our long-range water supply planning effort is this going to be enough to meet the water demands of 2070? So looking 50 years out. So we've engaged in this kind of iterative planning process, which first started with, well, what are the demands going to be? Our planning and development manager, Ruth Rouse, worked with TJ-Cog and the local entities to kind of embody the growth projections for this region. So fun fact about AWASA is that our sale and purchase agreement, we have no authority control over the growth of the area. And so we're here to serve the people that live in the service area. We actually have, we also have a kind of defined service area. If you think back to that map, let's see, go back here. The red area there is our service area. And that is defined by Town of Chapel Hill, Town of Carrboro, Orange County, Hillsborough have defined our service area. And so AWASA can't expand. You'll hear about water utilities that kind of proactively run lines to spur development or growth, and AWASA has no authority to do that unless all of those entities agree to expand the service area. So when we look at growth projections, we're just looking at what growth is projected in that redlined area. So we work, trying to understand our demands, modeling future risks, evaluating alternatives, really identifying those, prioritizing those. And we're actually right now here at this step number 9, community engagement. So just to be totally honest, I'm counting this as one of our community engagement on this topic. So that's where we are right now. And then eventually we're going to adopt the plan and, if necessary, pursue strategies to increase water supply resiliency. So this is the good news. So in terms of water supply for this area, we have a pretty low risk of running out of water under normal circumstances. So this is a graph of our historical and projected demands for water compared against the yield of our current water supply. And it includes the expansion of the quarry there in 2030. So I hope one of the first things that jumps out to you on this graph is the turn that demands took in the early 2000s. So we can't say enough, how proud we are of the community and your commitment to water conservation. So we're now selling about the same amount of water as we were in the late 1980s. Despite a pretty linear growth in accounts. And this is really due in large part to the university's investment in the reclaimed water system and the individual commitment across the service area to water-wise behavior. It's because of this commitment that our current supply is able to meet demands under most conditions for decades to come. The gray shading are projected demands, taking into account a range of uncertainty. And so we compare that against our projected yields, given the conditions of the worst drought that we have on record. And that was the drought that hit in 2001, 2002, the one that prompted the university to invest in the reclaimed water system. So you'll see under those conditions that in about 2060s is where we start to run the risk of not having enough water. And I also want to point out that should we have a drought that is worse than the one experienced in the early 2000s, that blue line will shift down. So that's an important thing to consider as we prepare for precipitation extremes that we might experience with climate change. Our largest vulnerability is to extended drought. So if you think back to that map that I showed earlier and the blue watershed outlines for University Lake and Cane Creek, while we have a lot of water storage, we don't have a lot of watershed to fill that storage. So this graph compares the volume of various reservoirs in the Triangle region to their drainage area or their watershed. So the longer the bar, the longer it takes to fill the reservoir. At the very bottom of the graph is University Lake. University Lake is quick to fill, but the storage is not huge. And at even current demands, it can't meet those, much less future demands. At the other end of the graph is Cane Creek plus the expanded quarry. So combined, these two reservoirs provide a lot of storage, but are not filled by a very large watershed. So the risk is if we get into an extended drought and we draw down these two reservoirs, it will take a considerable amount of time to refill them. We estimate, kind of depending on weather conditions, it could take over a year to refill Cane Creek after it's drained. So it's this vulnerability that drove AWASA and our board of directors to consider different ways to augment supply or further reduce demand. Oh shoot, this is one of those animated ones. So as I mentioned earlier, AWASA has undertaken a multi-step public and methodical process to evaluate how to increase the resiliency of our water supply. So after we determined demands, the next step was to look at alternatives for supply or reducing those demands. So we began reaching out to local government staff, John Richardson here, UNC hospitals, to just invite any and all ideas about supply and demand management. So all possibilities were on the table at that point. Then staff filtered those ideas to identify the most viable alternatives, looking at kind of back of the envelope costs, implementation issues, and how much water would be provided or saved by that alternative. And through that, we eliminated groundwater, stormwater, and some demand side management alternatives, which are kind of, the water conservation, things that would drive down that gray line instead of drive up the blue line on the demand and yield graph. So throughout this entire process, it was really important to our board that the community was informed and engaged in the decision-making process. So once we had this list of best alternatives, we conducted a round of community engagement. It was during COVID, so it was limited in some ways, but we held a webinar, we hosted a radio program, and there were a series of articles published in local news sources. And through that, we collected a lot of community feedback that the board used to develop guiding principles to help us further narrow our list of alternatives. And those guiding principles included, kind of first and foremost, quality drinking water. So that was kind of the bar that every alternative had to cross. Addressing our vulnerability to drought and improving reliability and resiliency, impacts on near-term and long-term rates, environmental and social impacts, the flexibility to change course as we learn more about demands. We certainly know that those demand and yield graphs are just estimates. They're most likely going to be wrong. So we wanted to value the flexibility to be able to change. And also to be able to support regional projects. So I got a little bit ahead. There's the community engagement throughout. And that led the board to conclude that really kind of a host of alternatives to secure AWASA's access to Jordan Lake was really the most viable and cost-effective alternative for AWASA. And so now we're engaging in community engagement to kind of discuss this whole process that the board has gone through, how they've reached this conclusion, and to get any feedback. So in terms of what alternative is pursued, that is still something that's underway. But it is a pretty critical time to be making this decision. There's a partnership of local utilities that are moving forward with designing and building a new treatment facility and transmission line on the western side of Jordan Lake. So that graph or that map showed that the only intake right now is on the eastern shore of Jordan Lake, which supplies water to towns of Cary and Apex, as well as Chatham County. So the new partnership is called the Western Intake Partnership, or the WIT, and it's made up of the city of Durham, the town of Pittsboro, and Chatham County. AWASA has been at the table with this partnership, but we're not an official member at this point. And this group has been working together since 2014 to discuss a regional approach to water supply and treatment. Their current plans are to build a new drinking water treatment plant with the first phase coming online in 2031 and a second phase coming online in 2050. So we are beginning discussions with the WIP to determine if and how we can work with this group, either as a partner or purchaser, to better secure our access, the community's access to Jordan Lake, as well as the kind of necessary treatment and transmission. An added benefit that was considered with this alternative too is that we currently have one water treatment plant. And so if something happens with that water treatment plant, that's a large vulnerability for the community. And so this adds an additional treatment alternative, as well as being a brand new water treatment plant that is being built with full knowledge, at least of the compounds of concern of the day, and planning for the treatment capability to address those. So that was a quick rundown of where we are with that. I can pause for questions now, Mike, or kind of go to the next topic, whichever you would prefer. I think I have like 6 minutes left, so I want to be mindful of time too.
If anyone has a question that they feel is super timely, go ahead and chime in. Otherwise, I think we can probably all hold off for 6 minutes. All right, perfect. Thank you.
All right. So switching now to energy, as I mentioned before, I manage our energy management program. And it's a lot of words on a slide to basically say that water and wastewater utilities use a lot of energy in a community. Number one use of energy for us is our pumps and motors. So moving all of that water around throughout the different process requires a significant amount of energy, and it makes up for a significant amount of our operating budget as well, about 5%. So in our last strategic plan, the board set a goal for AWASA to reduce our use of purchased electricity by 35% by 2022, and our use of purchased natural gas by 5% by 2020. They also asked us to look at options for making full use of that biogas that's generated at the wastewater treatment plant, and to explore options for renewable energy. So I'm pleased to kind of give some insight of where we are with that end of 2022 goal. Is we're almost there. We've reduced our use of purchased electricity and sustained that reduction by 34%, and we far surpassed our goal to reduce purchased natural gas, and that's been reduced by 28% since the 2010 baseline that was set. And we've done this through energy conservation, investment in cost-effective energy projects. Our biggest one to date has been a high efficiency mixing and aeration systems in our aeration basins at the wastewater treatment plant. We've also invested in variable frequency drives for any pump that it makes sense. We've replaced lighting with LEDs. We've baked energy decision making into our baked energy into much of our decision making, including like operations and maintenance, our capital projects. And one example is our biogas to boiler restoration. So I mentioned before that we burn about half of the biogas to reheat the digesters, and that really took a conscious effort by our maintenance team and operators to maintain that system. And every year we kind of increasingly so are saving about $550,000 of avoided costs and energy savings from this suite of projects. And the project that's going to get us over the finish line is a series of solar lease projects. So House Bill 589 was passed in 2017, and it authorized solar leasing in North Carolina. And through the solar lease, it's a public-private partnership where a private entity owns and operates the solar, and the owner of the land gets the energy benefit. And these facilities are net metered behind meters that are serving facilities. This partnership also allows entities to take advantage of some temporary rebates that are being offered by Duke Energy. So when this came about, we were enthusiastic about this opportunity because as a public entity, we can't take advantage of any kind of tax benefits. We also don't have a great deal of expertise about developing solar. So we issued an RFP in 2019. This is our ground mount system out at our biosolids land application site, which is on the corner of Highway 54 and Orange Grove Road. This is tucked way back. Here's an aerial of it in the upper left-hand corner. We have roof-mounted solar on our administration building right over my head. We have roof-mounted solar on our operations center, which is up the hill from our administration building. And then the project that broke ground yesterday was our largest project out at the Cane Creek Reservoir. So again, all of these systems are net metered or are connected behind the meter serving each of these facilities. I say net metered, but none of them are really designed to sell more energy than we use. At any of these facilities. They all are offsetting our purchased electricity by about 30 to 40%. Here's some statistics on all of those systems and kind of what we were looking at in terms of return on value. I will say the lease term, so we have 20-year lease terms with Eagle Solar and Light as the partner that we have on this project. And we went through a few iterations of what that contract looked like. When COVID hit, we had to seriously reconsider the structure of these contracts because we were committed to not raising rates in the middle of a pandemic. And so we restructured these leases to really be the ideal of what you want from the get-go, is that your lease payments very early on, for us it's in year one, are at or less than what our energy savings are. So AWASA ratepayers are not out any additional money for any of these projects, but they are helping to reduce our use of purchased electricity. Happy to talk probably for hours about that. Y'all are interested. And then the last thing I wanted to end on here is our strategic plan. So our last strategic plan included updated the long range water supply plan and our energy management plan. So you're kind of seeing the result of our last strategic plan. And as we look forward to the next 5 to 6 years, we're working through a process to identify the highest priorities for the organization and where we want to be making some significant progress. And the board has set strategic priorities, and we're working through a process now to identify strategic initiatives that support these priorities. And those 6 priorities are service reliability and resiliency, community engagement, service equity, climate and land use change adaptation, employee recruitment, retention, and development, and emergency preparedness and cybersecurity. So for Melissa and Mike that were on the very front end when we were conducting this fairly comprehensive scan of our community and our employees, this is as far as we've gotten, but a lot of work went into this. And so, like I said, we're working now on what are the exact initiatives that we want to put forward in this space. So stay tuned on that. And with that wraps it up, and happy to answer any questions that folks have. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Mary. That was great. Do we have questions?
I can't see hands.
No, I'm not sure I can either.
Okay, then maybe I'll just jump in really quick.
Thank you, Aaron.
No worries. Might as well get us started. Mary, really nice to meet you. So I'm Aaron Salzberg. I'm the director of the Water Institute here at UNC. And so first, I just want to thank you for all the great support that you give to so many of our researchers and students, because I know they take great advantage of you guys being close by. And so it's great that you're so supportive of them. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about maybe two things. One, and you mentioned this, but I'm curious how this prioritizes against some of the other risks. You focus a lot on drought, but what about water quality issues? I know PFAS was kind of the latest that got thrown into this. I suspect over the next 10 years, we're going to see a lot more things thrown into the mix that are going to require, probably dramatic changes in water treatment that might really up your costs and create new vulnerabilities. So I'm curious about that. And the other thing I'm a little bit curious about, and you mentioned the very last slide was social equity. Do environmental justice issues play into your service area at all? And what do your cutoff policies look like? And is there an opportunity to maybe revisit some of those types of cutoff policies in light of what we're hearing about ensuring some of these communities can maintain access? Maybe just start with some of those things. And by the way, you do know every year we hold the annual Water and Health Conference. When it went virtual, we ended up with 3,500 people from 120 countries. I suspect when we go back to the real experience back here in October, there'll probably be a huge demand for a subset of that group to come on over and see how you guys are tackling some of these challenges and hear from you. So that just leave you with that at some point it'd be great to connect to see how we can make use of you in as an example of what others in the world can begin to think about. Sorry.
Awesome. Well, I'll start with the easiest one first. So we would be happy to be a host during the Water and Health Conference and to participate in that. That would be really fun to hear, what folks are working on and thinking on a global level, and to be able to kind of get their thoughts on what we're doing. So absolutely, please consider us with that. For water quality, water quality is our number one concern. So as it relates to the use of Jordan Lake, a couple of thoughts on that. One is, we have looked at the drinking water quality reports as well as the raw water quality reports from the town of Cary that is supplying drinking water to hundreds of thousands of North Carolinians every day. And we have confidence in that. Under current regulations that looks good. The water treatment, I've kind of talked about that this new water treatment facility, it's going to be brand new. And we know that they are looking at treatment for PFAS, PFOA, as well as other compounds of concern. So that's going to be a high consideration in the development of that water treatment plant. And frankly, it will be probably leaps and bounds in terms of technology better than the Jones Ferry water treatment plant. So that provides some assurance as well. And again, that kind of resiliency that I mentioned about that. But it is, it is important. And I talked about the, protection of the watersheds, Cane Creek Reservoir watershed and the University Lake watershed. And, we're really proud of that. The community should be really proud of that. And so our board of directors has been, very sure to say that the use of Jordan Lake will be used to augment our existing water supply. So there's, it's still intended that those will remain our primary sources of water for decades to come. It's just, again, in those times of extended drought, Jordan Lake has such a huge watershed, which brings with it some, concerns about about pollutants as well, but it's extremely drought resilient. So water treatment will be extremely important, but we trust it will, it will be a part of that. So hopefully that answered your question on water quality, I guess in particular for long range water supply planning. We do regularly monitor our raw water, our treated water, our wastewater influent and wastewater effluent for PFAS. And so that is a report that's on our website that you can look at as well. So we're watching, like everyone else, what the EPA does with that roadmap and with regulations, and we'll be ready to respond accordingly. Service equity. So we have not, in March 2020, we suspended our standard collection practices, which was our standard collection practices are to disconnect service after 2 consecutive months of non-payment. So we suspended that in March 2020, and that has continued to date. So we have not done that. We've seen the number of customers that that have not paid, that are 60 days or more past due, which otherwise would be kind of subject to service disconnection, has somewhat stabilized. And we're concerned about seeing their past due balances accrue, but have done try to work really hard to connect them to various sources of utility bill assistance, many of which were stood up in response to COVID, including most recently a temporary federally funded program called Low Income Household Water Assistance Program. And we've seen our customers have taken great advantage of that. I think this morning when I looked, they had that program alone had provided over $107,000 of utility bill assistance since December. Now, it is the intention to resume that practice, our standard collection practices. In the near future, it's been pinned on Orange County's state of emergency, and we do know that's set to expire soon. So we are preparing to announce a resumption of that practice. We're going to be offering extended payment plans to all of our customers, fee-free, for up to 18 months, so that they can kind of spread out those past due balances, and are freeing up our customer. We have a customer assistance program that's supported by on-bill donations called Care to Share. And we have a partner, the Interfaith Council for Social Services, that typically administers that program during this time, as we resume standard collection practices. We're kind of administratively freeing that up, and we'll be just anyone who's interested being able to apply those funds to that assistance. And in terms of kind of indefinitely extending the standard collection practices, that's not something that our board or executive director have considered. I know our bondholders kind of appreciate that level of security, and so we've worked on the side of trying to provide as much assistance as possible. I can say, what else we're looking at for service equity are the households that live in our service area that are not currently connected to water or sewer. And so we're looking at the state Division of Water Infrastructure and some funding that they have for ARPA funding to potentially develop a program to fund that. We're also looking at the service lines, water service lines and sewer service lines that are on the private side of things, and how people can pay to repair those. So we're considering that as well. So that's where we are on that service equity consideration. A lot of utilities and the EFC is doing great work in this space as well, are kind of working through this. I think the all water utilities in the US are kind of at a point of change here. AWASA is not likely to be on kind of the bleeding edge of that, but we are watching it with great interest and are trying to be as proactive as we can.
Are you guys concerned at all about that? I know, the other Aaron and I have been involved in some of these discussions, Secretary Advisor, about how that some of those monies get used to, expand delivery into the underserved communities. But we also know that it might be harder to get cost recovery from some of those communities once the services are expanded, what it does to property taxes and repayment plans. I mean, is there thought given to maybe how do we deal with these cutoff policies in a different way when we start to extend those services? Or in some respects, those two issues might be linked.
Absolutely. I would welcome the opportunity to continue to discuss
that
that kind of connecting new customers. It's a relatively new space for us. Honestly, we just kind of wrapped our heads around what parcels have buildings on them that don't have water and sewer service about a month ago. So we're pretty early in our thinking and action on that.
Well, maybe, I'm sorry to dominate, but hey, don't hesitate to come to us with questions that you want students to work on. We're here as well to support you guys. And so on issues like this, where you think, a little bit of homework, a little bit of research on our site could be helpful, I think everybody on this call would love to help and support.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron and Aaron.
Are there other questions? I'm trying to scan for hands up, but if you have one, please go ahead and unmute. All right, perfect. So Mary, thank you. I'll just say that obviously that you've outlined that our relationship is so deep that the university may be a parent of AWASA or grandparent, which is something I actually didn't know, the degree to which the university owned the water infrastructure to start. We have been working together on things in a lot of great ways. I think Aaron Salzberg identified the number of researchers who benefit from the work that you all do and the access to your data. We're just thinking through ways to do something more to make new things happen. We never want to reinvent an existing perfect wheel, but we keep looking forward to ways that we can have the university be an even bigger resource for you and continue to have AWASA be a great resource for us. So thank you. We appreciate it. This is an easy one because we have had such great relationships in the past. We're just looking forward to more in the future. So thank you, Mary.
Thank you all. Is it okay if I stay on and listen to John Richardson?
100%. We'd love for you to stay as long as you like.
Thank you.
Tip our hand that there's a gem board in the future. So
Nice.
If you'd like to be involved, we'd love to have you.
All right. I may stick around even longer. Okay.
As long as you can, we'd love to have you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank y'all.
And a perfect segue, introducing John Richardson, another person with whom I have worked from just about day one of my time in this position, with the goal to try and have great communication with our surrounding municipalities and other political organizations, acknowledging, we have things we want to do around sustainability. We're far from perfect. Let's put it all on the table and figure out how we can move forward together. And John has been a wonderful partner in that space. He's going to talk about, I know a lot about our climate action plan and his climate action plan, but we've talked about a range of issues, and he is an invaluable partner, and I appreciate him. And so I'm going to leave it to John to give us some background on what we're doing, and maybe with an eye towards what we might do in the future.
Thank you very much, Mike. So I've got a presentation to share as well. Are you all seeing that screen okay? Yep. All right. Well, 2 confessions before I begin. I'm at home. So I've got a dog here with me. I hope she doesn't bark. I've got cookies to try and manage that if she does. But if it gets bad, let me know. Also, let me know if you can't hear me. Sometimes my mic cuts in and out. So those are my 2 qualifiers before I get started. Well, again, thank you all very much for having me. I'm really glad to be here to talk with you all about our climate action and response plan. And it includes some updates about some of the things we're doing. And as Mike alluded to, I also want to hit on some of the points of connection in the ways that I think we as a town are really benefiting from the good work that's happening on campus. So I want to try and highlight some of those things as well. But just for some context, back in 2021, last year, our council adopted the plan itself in April. And then following that in September, they received a 2-year, more detailed implementation plan. And this is really the roadmap for how we are beginning to try and meet our goals around climate action and resilience. At the same time, we were very excited to see the council's enthusiasm for authorizing for the first time a climate action fund of $470,000, which was designed to help us begin to implement this plan. And so this was a very exciting year, despite many other challenges. It was actually quite a momentous time for this work, and we've been really excited as a staff to try and move this forward. In terms of our goals, they are made up of sort of two main categories, and I think they'll be familiar to you all: emissions reduction and also clean renewable energy. And so we've got targets for 2030 and 2050. Looking around the state and around the country, these are goals that are similar, as you all may expect, to other North Carolina communities and other cities and counties. I'll also just say that rightly or wrongly, I oftentimes think of university campuses as being like mini cities. And so I feel like our goals are fairly well aligned with your goals too. And I know you all have a goal of reaching carbon neutrality by 2040, which is outstanding. And I think, the alignment we have locally is really impactful and important because we're all doing this together. And I would say that for AWASA too. Mary's still on the call. So I think we're all joined in this, and that's really exciting. It's really important. So let's see here. Come on to the next slide. Okay. So one thing you may or may not know, 95% of our community's emissions come from energy that's being used in two key sectors. One is buildings and one is transportation. And the two big challenges that we have in this work as a local government are, number one, like many communities, and as you can see on the slide here, municipal operations are only a very small piece of that problem, about 2%. So number two, we as a local government also have fairly limited ability to control or affect the outcomes that we need to see in order to meet these goals. So these two realities really help to shape our thinking about climate action in Chapel Hill, and I think probably the thinking of a lot of communities around the country. And they've also helped to reinforce the fact that there's really only one path forward that's going to be successful, and that is to have partnerships with our residents, with our businesses, certainly with the university and our local school system, and even perhaps more importantly, with our utility partners. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. But suffice it to say, we view partnerships and collaboration and goal alignment as all being sort of central and key to the work that we're doing in Chapel Hill. And I'd like to now just give you some examples of four categories where these actions are taking place around climate mitigation, the reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions that are leading to global challenges around climate change. So for our part, we've modeled some of this, and we know that the biggest opportunity to reduce emissions is by greening the grid. So we've modeled this at about a 30 to 31% reduction, and we know that this will have positive ripple effects as well. We'll talk about some of those. I also just want to start by saying too, we know and certainly appreciate the benefits of rooftop solar, but we've also learned that the most efficient deployment of renewable energy comes at the utility scale. So I'll touch upon that a little bit more later in the presentation, but I just want to underscore that point now. Number two, we know that the second biggest opportunity for emissions reduction is sustainable transportation. And so for us, this is about supporting a transition to electric vehicles. It's also about electric buses, bus rapid transit, and building out what's sort of a real town-wide network where you can move around without a car. And that's based on our mobility plan. And so again, these are areas where we do need help working with community partners to realize that transition for EVs in particular, both on on the public charging side and on the private charging side as well. A third impact category for us is sustainable development. So as we grow, we know that our development patterns can support our climate goals, particularly when we build neighborhoods that are more walkable, bikeable, and transit served. And of course, we want these buildings that are within these neighborhoods to be solar and electric vehicle ready to the extent that that makes sense. We also want them to be as energy efficient as possible. So these are all things we're working on from a planning standpoint through the way that we're re-envisioning and redeveloping our land use regulations at the local level. And then finally, we've learned that, of course, it's also really important to look at the buildings we've got, since that represents most of the buildings we have, and to look at ways to upgrade these, both in terms of looking at electrification, beneficial electrification, but also energy efficiency, where that makes sense. And again, this is where number 4 kind of connects with number 1 and number 2, I suppose you could say, in the sense that as the grid gets greener, obviously the cars that are electric, that's a cleaner ride, as well as the buildings we're experiencing as far as emissions reduction. So these are kind of the big mitigation action categories that we're focused on, and I'm going to share some more specific examples a little bit later in the presentation. Our plan doesn't just focus on mitigation, though. We're also focused on actions that can help us achieve greater resiliency and adapt to a changing climate. And so we think about resiliency in the same way most folks do, which is about, how do we bounce back from disruption as soon as possible? How can we plan for an event that might happen and be ready to respond? Here again, partnerships are really essential in this. So some of those examples might be things like smart grid technology to minimize impacts and outages, or battery storage is something we've started to look at, and particularly around solutions as we electrify our fleet, keeping our buses and our fleet vehicles running. So those two examples are probably more on the utility side of the partnership spectrum. Since Mary's on the call, I wanted to also highlight something she talked about, which is long-range water supply planning. Obviously, that's another resiliency aspect, certainly something we are very interested in, as are the other communities that are served by AWASA. So that's a great example, and we really benefit from that partnership as well. And then also a more localized example with your sustainable Triangle Field site, and Mike connecting us to a great opportunity, which is around looking at flood modeling, mitigation measures, and early warning system planning. As our climate is changing, it is affecting us locally. And so this is a great example of a project where we're benefiting from the work that you all are doing, not only in research, but also the way the students would want to engage and help us as a local community to try and improve the way that we're tackling these challenges. So those are just four examples on the resiliency side. Okay, so what are some other ways we can work together? Well, this is probably a no-brainer, but continuing to lower emissions from our respective operations, that's a goal alignment category for sure. Continuing to plan for EV infrastructure, I'll talk more about that in a minute. Continuing to invest in EV buses, I'll say something about that too. But then sort of moving away from mitigation and energy, there's also sort of a need, obviously, to be planning more holistically around sustainability, and zero waste being a good target that is shared not only locally, but also at the county scale. This is part of the master planning process that is beginning, and of course, we're all partners in that too. So I just wanted to make that connection as well. So again, I've said this a couple times, why does goal alignment matter to us? Why does it make sense to work together on these? This is an emissions forecast that shows different possible future scenarios. And while this slide is not old, the numbers are probably even better than what I'm showing you. And I want to say a specific, again, thanks to Mike and also Melanie Elliott, who's on this call too, for the great work that you all are doing around greenhouse gas emissions accounting, keeping up the inventories, tracking the latest successes. The work that you're doing helps us because we're able to fold that into graphics like this. And so just to orient you a little bit here, the gray line at the top is kind of the business as usual. So this is what we looked at if we were to do nothing or to mostly stay the same in terms of the things we are doing at the community scale, our emissions will go up. The line that's in the middle there, the dark blue line, represents plan implementation for the town of Chapel Hill. So if we fully implement the plan, obviously the curve starts to go the right way. But the real success here is when we combine our plan with your plan and the work that you're doing. That's the light blue, or Carolina blue line, I should say, at the bottom. And that represents the most significant progress we can make working together. I will say our plan is a 5-year time horizon, so we will be adjusting and reforecasting as we go. And what you see here is, for the most part, an 80% reduction from 2005 levels. We're focusing mainly on the things, the big rocks I was kind of talking about before, knowing that as technology advances, we can also continue to tackle the smaller pieces of this big pie, so to speak, as we move forward. Just real briefly, these are the 4 categories of our plan. I'm not going to read them to you, but hopefully they're mostly what you would expect as far as covering the spectrum. We have a series of action categories in the plan, if you were to look at it in more detail, and then 97 specific actions that we are working to implement over the next couple of years. And I'll start to touch on some of those more specific things here. All right, so what are those specifics? If I can get my slide. All right, here we go. All right, well, going back to the action category of greening the grid, this is a map from the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association, and this is showing solar installations in Orange County. So 662 by the last count. And you can also see here from the slide, the total solar capacity as of the time this was recorded is about 25, almost 26 megawatts. The 5 white circles that you're now seeing highlighted are representing utility scale solar installations. So the red dots, the yellow dots or the orange dots are residential, and the green dots are commercial. So what I want to highlight here is the fact that 5 of these 662 dots represent about 20 megawatts, or nearly 80% of the total solar capacity in the county today. So why is that significant? Well, I can tell you in Chapel Hill, we have about 151 of these dots, most of them being yellow or green, so non-utility scale. And that represents about 1.15 megawatts of solar capacity. So we know also in looking at some of Duke's numbers that the grid for our area is about 4% as far as clean renewable energy is concerned. So all of this is to say, while these rooftop systems are great and certainly important for building resiliency where we have them, this has led us to really focus more on the impact of utility scale solar installations and the need to partner with our utilities to really kind of make that happen. So we know that communities like Charlotte and Durham are looking at these opportunities. And so we're continuing to explore those same opportunities. We're also, our council is advocating around processes like Duke's carbon plan, which you may be following. Also previously their integrated resource plan, all with the goal of trying to increase the number of investment opportunities at that utility scale, not only that we can make as a local government, but also for community members. I mean, I hear from folks occasionally saying, I participated in NC Green Power. I'm wondering if there's something else that I can invest my resources into to try and create the future that I want to see. So I just wanted to start here because this is a huge opportunity for a lot of communities, but it's also one where we need more options and options that will drive us forward in the way we want to go. All right, switching gears, no pun intended, or maybe a little bit. Sustainable transportation. As some of you probably know, Chapel Hill Transit recently put 3 all-electric buses into service. One of these was made possible by the support of your Renewable Energy Special Projects Committee on campus, RESPC. Thank you very much. These buses are not cheap. And so the fact that RESPC made that investment is outstanding. And I also just want to share that we've got 7 more on order, 7 more of these buses. And we're looking to fund beyond this first 10 as well. Something you may not know is, and that may be less obvious to the operation, Transit also recently added 17 new Nissan Leafs, which serve as shuttle cars for operators and also support other tasks behind the scenes. So those 2 things in tandem are really sort of driving the electrification of this system forward in some pretty dramatic ways. And to support this on the resiliency side, I also wanted to share that Transit is also looking to conduct a solar study, or actually we're in the process of doing that right now, to explore the feasibility of adding renewables to the main facility on Millhouse Road. So more to come on that, but there's a really, I think, a nice holistic approach to this work going on at Chapel Hill Transit. Another big focus for sustainability is the town's mobility plan. I mentioned that before. I'll just briefly say this plan, as I said, represents a community-wide mobility network. And hopefully the idea is you won't have to use a car to utilize this network. That's the end goal for this plan. By last count, we have nearly 70 miles of mobility infrastructure in town, non-vehicular, I should say. So bike lanes, greenways, sharrows, side paths. Not all of that is paved. Some of it isn't. I feel like I should qualify that. But this year we are completing 5 more segments from the mobility plan and also advancing 7 more. So this is a really exciting project for Northwest and East-South, North, South, and East-West movement in Chapel Hill. And something that complements this is that we're also developing a wayfinding system to help enhance the usability of this network. So this is something else that's underway. And one key example, I think, in this, or maybe something that's interesting to think about, is not only for the new infrastructure where we're going to want to put signage and paint and other things to help folks navigate this new network, we're also thinking about existing greenways and rethinking how we describe them. So I think historically greenways to most people are recreation. We'd like to rebrand them as point-to-point infrastructure for transportation. So, you might see a sign in the future that says 2 miles to University Place or 1 mile to downtown, that kind of thing. Whereas before it would have been more of a recreational component to our community, and still will be, but we're trying to double dip there. Something else I'll say, we're also looking to invest in more publicly available EV charging. This is an example from Town Hall. We're experimenting with some things here. So this is charging not only for the public, but also for employees and for fleet vehicles. So we're looking to do more of this. This one came from the state's VW settlement. And so we're looking at other opportunities from that grant. Another example is the Rosemary parking deck. So this is a project where we're looking day one to start with at least 20 stations, but we are also planning for the capacity for 220, up to 220 in the long run. So this project also, we just put in a grant application for the rooftop canopy solar that you see here. And this rendering, so fingers crossed we can make that part happen as well. All right, I'm going to switch gears a little bit too to the planning side of EVs. We're looking to create a network, as I mentioned, of publicly available charging stations throughout our community. We're also working with municipal partners and the university. Again, Melanie, thank you, and Mike, to create a screening tool that's going to help us identify suitable locations for public level 2 charging stations. I'm not going to bore you with the details here, but it is including, we're borrowing from the good work that the city of Raleigh shared with us in their efforts to do the same thing. It includes layers like AADT and points of interest like parks to try and build this suitability analysis. I want to say too that this is kind of a 2-step process, because what we see is it'll help us identify places in Chapel Hill and hopefully in these other communities that are partners where we could place or they would be good locations for public charging. But then there's another step that's needed, which is to have conversations with residents and property owners in that vicinity to make sure it's a good fit. But again, I just want to thank Mike and Melanie for being a part of this and for helping us and include UNC's interests as well as we build this in. This is an image of a home from the North Side neighborhood, and this is an area that participated in home energy assessments and upgrades 2 years ago. And so, you know, why does this kind of programming matter? Again, the building sector is the largest generator of emissions for us. So we're looking at this in two different ways. One is we're looking at new construction. We're hoping to, or in the process of actually upgrading our policy around green buildings, the council's policy. And that's where we're going to try and look at new construction and what moves the needle for developers who are coming into the community to try and build more and do that in the right way, in a way that actually supports our goals. We've experimented with different things over time. We've had some successes and some areas where we can improve things, but we think this policy framework upgrade will help us do that better. The other thing I think that's important to talk about is we're currently also looking at our existing rehab, housing, and weatherization programs in our area and looking to take climate action funds to plug in gaps for those existing programs. So here again, it's building resiliency and affordability where homeowners have the most to gain. And that's a program we're currently in the process of building again with our community partners. I'll also just quickly note we're going to be launching and participating in a regional Solarize initiative this summer, so look for that. And again, another focus of this work is beneficial electrification. Just got a couple more slides here. This is one, some of you may be familiar with this. This is looking at a different aspect of climate action, more on the resiliency side. This is a thermal image. This comes from another community, but it shows heat loss from a poorly insulated structure on a cold night. We know being in Chapel Hill and in the Triangle area, the opposite, of course, can be true on a very hot day. So from a resiliency standpoint, we're also working to better understand who in our community is energy burdened, both in terms of the cost for utilities, but also the impacts from extreme temperatures, particularly in the summertime. And I want to highlight real quickly, very happy to share, and again, thanks to Mike for connecting us. We've established a wonderful working relationship with Dr. Angel Hsu here at UNC. And as some of you know, Dr. Hsu's work is quite often interdisciplinary, focuses on social, environmental, and economic impacts. Of late, the one I'm connected to is the work on extreme heat. And so this is work that's being also done in partnership with the Museum of Life and Science, the Data-Driven EnviroLab, the Moorhead Planetarium, the North Carolina Climate Office, and your School of Public Policy, just to name a few. So I just wanted to share too that we are learning a lot from this collaboration, particularly around extreme heat. The image you see on the left is some work we did a few years ago. Dr. Hsu reached out and said, do you have any places around town where you could point us to, where we could do some on-site work as far as sensors and walk around and see what's actually happening in the way of extreme heat. So that got translated into this wonderful report and work that their team did. And so we've learned a lot more about what's happening on the ground from these citizen science type of collaborations. And I think it's a real launching point to take us forward. So I will just finish by saying this is a quick plug for the heat hack that's happening in a couple of days. And again, the idea is we've shared some data. I think others have shared data, and we're trying to open it up and see what questions can be answered by anyone who wants to participate in this. As I said before, we have really benefited tremendously from these kinds of projects, from this kind of collaboration. I tell Mike this all the time, let us be your local learning laboratory. I think Mary said something similar in her presentation. So, you know, I'll just say we as a town, we need help figuring out these complex and important questions, and I've really appreciated and benefited from the collaboration to date. So thank you very much. This is my PowerPoint version of my card. If anybody's interested to reach out, and I'd be glad to try and tackle any questions you might have.
Thank you, John. That was great. And just before I forget, everyone on the call or on this video will get an invitation. And those of you out in streaming land, reach out if you'd like to come to the students who are doing the flood resilience work that John alluded to are presenting a week from tomorrow. So you'll all get an invitation, but I don't want to spoil it, but their data are awesome. So they don't know it, but they're leading a charmed science life. They may never have data this good again. And John, you'll love it because I think it's kind of a precursor to another potential partnership. So thank you, John. That was fantastic. I think it's true that we're not getting anywhere without our partnerships, and this is one that is among our strongest. So thank you. We appreciate it. Are there questions for John? Elizabeth.
Hi, John. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and the overview. I wanted to mention also that the Southeast Regional Climate Center is doing a ton of work on heat and health issues, especially in rural areas. But it sounds like you have plenty of partners in that area. But Chip Conrad is the lead of the Southeast Regional Climate Center, and I'd be happy to connect you with him as well. And then I just had one other question. I just have noticed seeing the absence of discussion of transportation. And so I was wondering if you have any insights there. I think this is on my mind. I don't know if anyone else saw this morning that there's a big article in the New York Times about how Portland is really struggling to, they're basically investing in road expansion and people are so dependent on individual cars. And I know transportation, coordinating transportation planning has been a challenge. So I'm just wondering if you have anything to say about how that figures in, because your energy, I guess it kind of relates to the pie chart at the beginning. That's the community is everything, but then, differentiating that into transportation, households, businesses, et cetera. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on the opportunities and significant challenges around climate and transportation in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. I do have a few thoughts. And I probably should have said some of this earlier. I think, so I have a planning background, so I tend to think about transportation in the ways that it connects to our land use planning as well. And I think it's safe to say the town thinks about it that way too. So, one of the things I would share is that we are currently in the process. So the town, I think it was last year, adopted a future land use map that looks to concentrate new development along our major corridors, our transportation corridors. And part of the strategy is to think about how those land use decisions also connect to our investments in something like bus rapid transit along that north-south corridor of Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. Further to the south, maybe think about future east-west expansion of that same type of approach. And so, long story short, that is kind of the long-term goal of how we move from more single occupancy vehicle transportation to land use patterns that better support mass transit, truly better support mass transit in all the ways that I think so many folks in our community want to see it happen. The challenge is right now, so many folks are still driving cars. And the reason being is, if we're being honest with ourselves, we're still a largely suburban community. We're also still a largely suburban region. And in fact, I forget the exact number, but a very significant percentage of the people who work in Chapel Hill are still driving in from other communities. And so it's not only about solving some of those challenges within our community, but it's also continuing to work at that regional scale to plan out the transportation solutions that are not only workable, but actually practical, I think, to really kind of solve some of these problems. But we're not there yet. So it's kind of two things at once. We're working to plan for that future, while at the same time recognizing that the cars we're all driving today are still problematic. So we do need to still transition to the electric vehicles in the near term in order to try and drive down and mitigate those emissions, so that we can get ourselves to that point in the future where perhaps we don't have to depend so much on those individual vehicles.
Thank you, John. Are there other questions for John? Trying to scan, looking for hands, but if I'm not seeing you, go ahead and unmute.
And while others may be thinking, I just want to add to that part about the mobility plan is also meant to supplement some of what I was describing as well, that you don't actually need a car, or you might not even need to ride a bus to get around too. I should have said that too.
Great. Well, thank you, John, very much. And we, as always, appreciate you as a partner. I think there's lots of good and more good to happen for sure. So thank you again. All right, if we don't have any other questions for John, we will move on in our agenda. And next up, we have Abigail Brewer talking to us about so you provided good input on the water plan, which is our big reveal for Earth Day. Not to give anything away to those of you out there in streaming land, please keep it quiet. Not really, but we're excited to have a big announcement on Earth Day, and Abigail's going to talk about communications broadly and specifically a little bit what we're thinking about around Earth Day, which is tomorrow, as we all know. Abigail, please take it away.
All right, I'm just going to share my screen. Nope. All right, can everybody see that? Okay. So like Mike said, today I'm going to be talking about our water plan, communications plan broadly. We've been referring to this upcoming year as our water year here at Sustainable Carolina. Last year we focused on climate, and this year we're looking at water. So we kind of closed out our climate year with a recap video, which we posted on our Twitter earlier this week. And I can link to that tweet later on. Actually, I'll just go ahead and put it in the chat now. Right. So if you want to take a look at that later. And so the communications plan for our water plan is just one small piece of our overall Sustainable Carolina communications plan. And so today I'm going to walk through these 3 different phases that I've assigned to it to keep things fresh throughout the year. And we'll have all of our normal sustainable content, but we're going to have extra content for water year. So I'll go through these. The first part of the water plan is going to focus on the goals and strategies aspect. So we're going to look at our strategies, because as the comment period is open, we think that people are going to have the most feedback on this aspect. And then as we move into the fall, we'll look at sources, because we're hoping that this can kind of serve as the engagement part. And we're going to engage with students as they come back to campus in the fall. We actually had a really great engagement activity this spring with some of the LFIT classes, and we took them out to Meeting of the Waters Creek and sort of explained the operations and research side of things and how they work together. So we're hoping to do more things like that come fall. And then as we get into winter, we're going to talk about progress, and it's going to be very forward looking and looking at some of the innovations that we have. All right, so, oops, I skipped one. All right. So for phase 1, it's going to be under this umbrella slogan of water sustains all, Carolina sustains water. And the main message is that, campus and the community depend on us to use our finite resource wisely and to develop practices that manage it well. And like I said, our focus area, goals and strategies, and our main communications goal is to continue to receive feedback through that open comment period. And because we are already technically in phase 1 of the water plan, some of the Earth Week deliverables are on the screen, and these will go up today and tomorrow. I don't know if we want to watch the video. It might stream kind of weird on here, but we can try. Is it good?
There's nothing better than Chapel Hill in the spring, particularly in the spring after a great run in the Final Four. We're here at the Old Well, which is certainly among the university's great icons. But not only is it an icon, it was the sole drinking water supply when the university first started.
Today, most of the water used on campus is purchased from AWASA. As AWASA's largest customer, it's our responsibility to use water sustainably. We're also partnering with AWASA to promote water research using local utility data.
Here we are in the middle of Earth Month, moving towards Earth Day and looking forward to the release of our water plan.
With our water plan, we're introducing some new goals. We want to reduce our water footprint, and this means minimizing water consumption on campus, maximizing the proportion of non-potable water, and reducing our impact on stormwater runoff using strategies like green roofs and permeable pavement. To dive into campus water sources, goals, and strategies described in our water plan, visit our website here.
So that's just a short video to introduce the plan. And Melanie has done a great job putting the plan together and also creating a really beautiful web page that will go with that. And Mary, you'll see that I used the AWASA graphic. I emailed Blake because we worked on the Creek Week together. And so, yeah, he sent that to me. So we have a great AWASA graphic in there.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Oops. All right. And so as we get into fall, we're going to have students coming back into campus. And I think one of the really great things that we can do is introduce them to both the operations and research side of things. And, the Sustainable Triangle Field site serves as a great resource for that. And that's actually where this picture comes from, I believe. And that's Vic, our former program manager. And so Mike likes to say a lot, the university is in a dense area. We're up on a hill. So everything flows down from here. So slogan there is up on a hill with eyes downstream, and you can kind of read the main message and look at the communications goal over on the right side. All right, and lastly, we have bringing innovation to greater heights. For this one, I really wanted to use the ceiling as the roof and play with that, but Mike said that, maybe not everybody knows what that means. So here we are, bringing innovation to greater heights. And so this will focus on operations and research working together and that progress that we're making with the goal of engaging these operations and communications people. All right, and so this is just a handful of the campus departments and schools and operations offices that will serve as great stakeholders throughout this plan. And this is all listed in the water plan as well. And yes. All right, so expanding the reach of the water plan. So I think we're going to have some press kits, some social media kits for our council members. I'd like to kind of make unique kits for different schools. So I know, the business school has different, priorities than the School of Public Health and the School of Government. So kind of crafting social media posts specifically for these individual units, I think will create a more cohesive approach. And so those will go out. And I know Elizabeth mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that it would be really great to kind of have some communication about some of the items. And I think for the water plan especially, I'd like to send an email out at the beginning of each phase just to kind of keep it at the top of everyone's mind. And yeah. All right. And so our social channels, if you're not already following them, are listed below. And I'm always here if you would like to email me.
Thank you, Abigail. I should say that our social media presence is revived. Thank you. There's certainly great material and definitely new energy around it. So everyone, if you're not, please follow everything. And also please feel free to alert us to stuff that you want us to amplify. That's how we're going to succeed, is when we get re-engaged with the full sustainability community at the university and beyond. All right, do people have questions for Abigail?
No, but maybe one quick comment. Folks might not be aware, but 2023 is likely going to be probably the biggest year on water globally in about 50 years or so. governments will be meeting for the first time at heads of state level in March 2023 to talk about water at the UN. There may be opportunities to highlight some of this work and get praise for some of this work in venues like that. So maybe we should look to see if there's ways we could submit some of these as part of the actions that are getting done at the UN level and maybe get some extra recognition to the university.
That sounds awesome. And we will defer to you as our international diplomats. We'd love to work through the Water Institute on that.
No, we're happy to talk about it with Abigail and others.
Absolutely.
Great.
Thank you. Any other questions for Abigail? We're of course looking forward to in-person fun activities as opposed to these, but I think there's a lot to talk about and Abigail's got a great plan. All right. Well, thank you. That was great. And of course, always follow up if you have thoughts after the meeting. So now we are to our final piece of our agenda. My computer just went to sleep, forgive me. So we're going to be talking with you all about, we shared our strategic framework, a draft of our strategic framework previously, and we've now broken it back down a little bit to an outline emphasizing the specific things that we'd like to do. And we'd like to just take the last part of the meeting to engage with everyone and get thoughts and ideas around things we may not have thought of, smart ways to implement all the things that we have in the plan. So I will own that I'm a Jamboard skeptic, but I went to a meeting, I guess it was a couple months ago, that Hope Thompson, who was in the collaboratory and is a recent graduate of Gillings, hosted, and she did an amazing job and it was incredibly productive. So we thought we'd give it a roll. And so now Melanie and I are going to ease you through some Jamboard engagement that Melanie will take care of all of the specifics. But the broad idea here, as I said, is to look through the water plan and look at the ways that we're planning to approach things and just give you a really direct opportunity to provide feedback. So Melanie, would you like to provide a little bit of some guide rails?
Yeah, hi. I'm going to share the link to the Jamboard in the chat in just a second. Actually, let me do that first. That makes more sense. And so you should be able to edit. Can I not copy? Hold on one second. There we go. Okay. So you should be able to access this in the chat, but if you don't want to use the Jamboard, or it's uncomfortable for you, or you're just having technical difficulties, you can drop notes in the chat and we'll keep an eye on the chat and then we can make notes accordingly. But so this is just kind of an introductory slide to let you know how to use the Jamboard today. And so you can see here, there's a little sticky note icon here, and you'll just click on that and you can type your note and then you'll hit save. And when you're done making notes, you can cancel, or you can also change your color of your sticky note here. And you can move it, you can resize, you can make as many notes as you want. And then, so this slide, you should be able to access it at any time. I'm just going to share the slide that we're referencing in the moment. But this will be here for your reference. And like I said, if it's not working, just drop information in the chat.
All right.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Nope, I think you should. If you have something else to say, I was just going to say, you're going to show the goals and here they are.
Perfect.
All right. So what we're going to do is go goal by goal and provide a period of time for everyone to give their thoughts and ideas and work through all of the goals. And then hopefully at the end, have a pretty good representative bit of feedback and synthesize a little bit. So Melanie, do we go to follow the link that you provided?
Yes. So it looks like a lot of people are already in here, maybe about 10 or 11 folks. But yeah, if you can click on the link, that would be the only way that you can add a sticky note. But again, you can use the chat if needed.
All right, perfect. So what I see doesn't look like it's quite ready. Do we advance one from there maybe? Or are we ready to interact?
Yeah, so you should be able to advance at the top.
Aha, so we advance it. So everybody hit the right arrow.
Yes, yeah. So
of
you
times.
can, on your own time, you can flip back if you need to reference another slide, but we'll be working on slides 3, 4, and 5 today.
Perfect. So I'm on slide 3 that says goal 1. So is everybody there, hopefully? All right, we've got some ideas to get you started, stuff that are integral to work that's already being done. So do we want to, Melanie, do you think we want to have everyone work on 3, 4, and 5 all together? Like all at once?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to maybe focus on like slide 3 for right now. But of course, people can jump around if that, if it makes sense, if you come up with an idea that's more appropriate for a different goal, by all means, flip around. But just for the sake of discussion, it's probably best that we kind of maybe spend a couple minutes on this slide, and we can speak out loud if we need to, or if anyone's like, hey, I'm not sure if this is appropriate for this goal, then we can talk about it a bit. But maybe spend a few minutes on 3 and then 4 and then 5.
Perfect. And the last thing I'll say about 3 is we're leaning towards looking for ideas for sustainable Carolina. There's lots of great stuff at the university that individual units do or other collective organizations do, but what sorts of things can you think of that would be good for us to become involved in, with our goal of constantly looking for new things to do that are complementary to the things that are already going on? So there's already an awesome one. All right, here we go. Thank you in advance for your input.
And I'll also just add that feel free to put your name on the sticky note if for some reason you don't want to discuss it maybe right now, but you want us to reach out and further discuss it at a later time. But that's not necessary if you don't want to do that. And I think we have some great ideas coming in. I'll say that sports teams, a sponsorship is not something that we had thought of so far. So some of these ideas, we've been discussing as a group. But yeah, some interesting ideas kind of coming through. So thank you for sharing that one.
I think this is kind of like making popcorn. You want to cook it until the kernels stop popping, but not stop cooking too soon. So I feel like maybe we're ebbing a little bit. I don't want to discourage any input, but yeah, this looks great. As Melanie said, some ideas that we haven't thought of, which is the very best.
And again, if we move to another slide and you think of something that is more pertinent to this slide than another, then you can flip back on your own. I'm just gonna, have these up to help spur ideas. So. Okay, but I do agree. It seems like it's slowed down a bit. Do you want to move on to the next one, Mike?
Yep, I think that's a good idea.
So again, we've already put a couple of ideas on here for you. And, I'll just kind of speak a little bit as you're thinking of different ideas that we see this goal as kind of more on the unit level where we're interacting with specific units. And one example is Green Office that Cindy's working on, where she would be engaging with different units. And this is to help facilitate transformative action.
There's a theme here.
There is. All right, this looks like, I know it is. It is more great input, and it also seems as though perhaps the input on goal 2 has slowed a little bit. But if you want to keep working on goal 2, please do. I love the dashboard that you then need to share when it's actually updated. That's a good idea. We are working in that direction for sure. All right, so that's goal 2, which is great. No means can't go back, but I think if we now move on to goal 3, which is nurturing educational efforts, which is language we choose intentionally. We're not obviously curricular in any way, but we do have really great connections to curricular efforts. And some of us have joint appointments that are curricular. So I think that continuing the efforts through time that have been so effective in harvesting sustainability activities for the benefits of students. Field sites are a great one. Capstones are a great one. Eco Studio is one where lots of people in our group have had multiple Eco Studio interns. I think Cindy might have maybe 3 this semester, a huge number of great students helping her out. So that is a great mechanism to engage students directly in sustainability work. So any other ideas that people might have about ways to connect Sustainable Carolina to educational efforts, which are mostly going to be curricular, but I already see there's a good one on alumni, which is sort of a non-traditional way. I think that's a great idea. Sustainability Stewards Program is another good one that I saw in goal 1 as well that we're working on, and hopefully we'll be bringing something out soon. Ooh, that's a really good one. So cause and effect, of student-initiated work. I think that is a really good idea. Yeah, and that, I think we do a pretty good job maybe of communicating either the action or the result of the result, but connecting those I think is great. There was a recent article on the solar on top of, which storm is it, Cindy, the first one? Is it Aaron?
Morrison.
Morrison, and I think that seemed to do a pretty good cause and effect assessment in that story, but that's a really, really good idea to make sure that we're not only celebrating successes, but also linking them to the results. Ooh, I like sustainability TEDx. That's a great idea. We could put the stage in the atrium of Europa because it's fast and impressive feeling. No, that's a really good idea. Speaker series, I think, have been done well in the past, but it's something that I think could be revived, especially as we remain optimistic, hopefully, about moving back towards in-person, but also remain realistic that recorded talks like that would have a significant audience. Yep. That's a really good one. There was one about data access, I think maybe on the last slide, that was really could have been in educational as well. So that climate interactive simulations is very similar. Definitely on the innovation and entrepreneurship. So I've been talking to Michelle Bolus about some really specific things, but also some more general things to be sure that as we do downtown revitalization and things like that, where we know a lot of our connections to the town of Chapel Hill are around issues like sustainability, and we know the university is spinning off lots of clean tech and sustainable businesses, and most of them are ending up in Durham. So it'd be nice to keep some of them closer to home. Yep, connections to student groups is a really good one. We do have the Environmental Coalition that hope to do that, and I think did it quite well, but that we can improve upon. We're working on that. Abigail's become involved in the coalition so that Sustainable Carolina will have a little bit more of a direct foot in assisting with that and helping to sort of the continuity, ongoing challenge of wonderful students who are only here for a short period of time. Sustainability course guide, that's definitely a good one. I think we have a list that Cindy generated for ASHE that's definitely hundreds of classes. It's a lot. So I think we'd have to find some sort of, we'd develop a search tool, I think, to make the list even more valuable. But that's an excellent idea. All right. So is this our last one, or do we have one more?
This is the last one. That one should, yeah, just be blank. So.
Okay, perfect. So here we go again with I'm having to get rid of my Jamboard skepticism. So thank you all for being game to participate in the Jamboard, which I still think is a goofy name, but it is a useful tool. So as always, this is not the end of engagement with the water plan and the things we're going to do to get it going and make it everything that it should be. We'll have a formal public engagement period coming up, which of course we wish could be in person, but we probably won't be. But there will be lots of opportunities for you all to continue to interact with us. And as we spin up programs as a part of these specific actions, you will always be hearing about them. Oh, I like the field trip one. That's a good one, Mary. We'll be coming.
Who put that they did SDG work and mapping?
That's, yeah,
That
Jeff.
was, yeah, that was us in the Center for Sustainable Enterprise. We had a student go through and look at the SDGs and if they were being addressed in courses. But then, that was for 1 year. And then how do we keep that going?
Yeah, that was great work. I talked with Jeff about that. But again, you do it once and you kind of, I think it will carry for some, but you continue to, of course, have to refresh, but that's definitely exciting. All right, what are we doing? Following the flow. Oh yeah, another good one. Well, thank you all. This is great. So Melanie, do we have other formal things we wanted to do with the Jamboard vehicle other than that we will harvest it and certainly benefit from all of your input and be back in touch as we work on incorporating and updating?
I think that's everything. Yeah.
All right. So we're ahead of time and this has been a great meeting as always. Thank you, John. Thank you, Mary, if you're still here. We can't thank you enough for being great partners and also for coming to talk to us today. I think checking in all the time, even if we're becoming more and more familiar with one another is really important. We are definitely looking forward to future great things. I hope everybody who can will come next Friday. The Sustainable Triangle Field Site class looked at Morgan Creek, Booker Creek, and Bowlin Creek and did a bunch of spatial analyses about where challenges exist. Thank you, Natalie, for coming. See you soon. Where challenges exist, where are there opportunities for interventions to potentially using green infrastructure. They did a study of what might a sensor network look like, including where sensors are and where are there opportunities for sensors, which was pretty practical, like culverts and bridges and places where you could actually put a sensor. And then they also just deployed sensors of their own. And those water level data those are the Charm Science Life ones that I refer to. They are stunningly cool with an eye towards understanding where peak elevation in water is throughout the watershed during a big rain event. So that was in Booker Creek. And so we looked from just below Lake Ellen all the way down to the mall. And there was amazing continuity in terms of what the hydrograph looked like, the way that the water level went, and some real promise in terms of a sensor network being able to give us time, somewhat like an hour and 15 minutes maybe, to respond to a big rain event. So that would be a great way to, because we know, most of you may know that in the mall, they're able to react with floodgates and things like that, but they need some time. So that was the beginning of this work. And I think projects like those that are multifaceted, they're providing data that can be used in lots of different ways, but are solving problems right at their core, are awfully exciting. All right, does anyone else have anything else they would like to talk about? Well, that was great. So thank you again. Really great meeting. As I said, well, we've already got stuff planned for the first fall meeting. We'll be in touch over the summer about a handful of things with several of you, but please reach out if there's anything you'd like to share or volunteer for. And we've got a great bunch of input, and that's fantastic. So thank you again, and everybody enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and you're free 2 minutes. Thank you.